From the thunder of cannons to the clash of muskets, the Napoleonic Wars are a wargamer's dream come true. But before you muster your troops, you'll need to know the essentials that make this era truly come alive on the tabletop. So join us today as we explore my top 4 tips for diving into the Napoleonic Wars and how to get your wargaming going to the best of your abilities and turn your next battle into a grand historical spectacle. If you haven't already, do please like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out when we release videos. Also go and check us out on Facebook, join us there so again any updates you're kept in the loop. With that all said and done, let's get into it. So first up guys, what you got to decide is what scale are we going to be playing at? Are you a skirmish wargamer? Are you an epic, gigantic battle wargamer? Or are you somewhere in between? That's going to dictate really which rule sets you go for. So really, when it comes to deciding I'm getting into Napoleonics, that's your first step. Before you even go and get miniatures or a rule set, decide on what sort of things you want to be doing. A lot of people think that the Napoleonic Wars were all the big battles, Borodino, Waterloo, Austerlitz, etc. And often they think, oh, there weren't that many skirmishes. But you'd be surprised, over the course of best part of 20 years, there would have been an awful lot of small-scale skirmishes going on. Ones that just jump to mind would be, say, in Spain, when you had the French and the guerrilla fighters. You could have a heck of a lot of interesting games there, and you could always drop in Richard Sharp and his riflemen as well. So there were definitely skirmishes of 50 to 100 men throughout the Napoleonic Wars. You had partisans pretty well in all the different countries, so that's an option. If on the other hand you do want to be a corps commander or an army commander and be moving large blocks of men across the board, that is available also. So as I said, just have a think about it and decide which way you want to go. Then once you've decided that, you can then decide, right, which rule set do I want, which is going to give me the best representation of those armies. Which am I going more for speed and a reasonable amount of realism, or do I want to really get into the nitty-gritty of the tactics? When it comes to the unit, like the bases, your miniatures themselves, are you someone that wants to remove a casualty every time someone gets injured or killed, or are you happy to just sort of abstract it out, maybe use markers or dice or some other method of tracking? So that's your first step, is just decide on what scale you want your battles to take place at. So you've decided what scale wargames you're going to be wanting to play, so now let's get some rules. If you are wanting to go for the larger scale, then you've got rule sets such as Black Powder, which is quite an easy game to get into, and you can also, depending on whether you want to be using larger, more skirmishy miniatures at 28mm, or whether you want to be doing much smaller but larger representations, you've got their 2 different ranges of the epic battles versus the 28s. Other rule sets for large scale games would be like General d'Armée or General de Brigade. So again, brigade slightly smaller than the army, but still larger scale. There's also my rule set, which again is designed to allow you to have usually about a corps at most, or a division. Is quite random in that you can choose to either just choose whatever troops you want, or you can roll to decide at the start of the battle how many units each side are going to have. It's a little mechanic which I enjoy because historically most armies weren't balanced. Too many rule sets, in my opinion, have balanced armies. It's just not the case. You always want to have a strategic advantage over your opponent and bring more forces to bear. So with my rule set, you roll the dice, and depending on what the roll is, you may have every unit available, or you might have a very small unit available. So that's quite a good hybrid game. If you are looking more just for your skirmishing game, then you do have Sharp Practice, which is a really interesting, fun game. It's quite narrative, quite exciting. I will be doing an actual video on that, on building an army for it, and then some reviews in due course and battle reports for that also. So again, at this stage, find the rule set which represents what you want to be playing. So next up we've got what I guess you could class as the barrier to entry. This is going to be the cost associated with getting into the game. So what are you actually going to need? Firstly, you're going to need a rule set. So you can go out and buy a rule set, or there's some usually available online for free. If you watch enough YouTube videos, you can get the gist of most games as well before you even go out and buy. So there's quite a few options there as to not having to spend too much money on your rules. But then once you've got your rules, you're going to have to then get some figures. Figures are probably going to be your biggest individual cost, and depending on which way you go, if you were to buy, say, the Warlord Games starter set for the 100 Days campaign, you're going to be looking at probably $150 to $200, depending on what currency you're using. So it is quite a big initial investment, but you're going to get enough troops to do whatever you want. It'll come with rules. I'm pretty sure it comes with dice as well. I'm not sure if it comes with a tape measure. So you're going to get pretty well everything that you need to get started. Other rule sets, however, like I mentioned, Sharp Practice and even my own, they are just the rules. So you would buy the rules, but then you're also going to have to buy the extras on top of that. What are the extras? I would say almost every single game out there, could be wrong, but will need dice. And if it's not dice, it'll be a set of cards. And a tape measure. Again, almost all rule sets will require a tape measure. So they're about the main things you're going to need is miniatures, dice, tape measure, and rule set. Next up is going to be, when it comes time to paint your figures, you're going to need to buy some paints. So you're going to probably want a spray paint, black or grey or white to do your base coat, and then again, depending on the scale, if you go for the smaller miniatures, they're easier to paint without having to go over the top with lots of detail, whereas the larger the miniatures, the more detail there is, so the more colours you need. So it is cheaper to do the small ones, but it's entirely up to you. But yes, anything probably from about $20 to $200 you could spend on getting your paints and paintbrushes. Obviously you could go cheaper if you just go for craft paints, which are perfectly fine. From the store, a lot of my videos I use craft paints. I pointed out as well in those videos, and they work. They're not quite as good, in my opinion, as using a specific miniature paint, but they do the job. So the option is available to do it on the cheap if you wish. And now we've got the final section, which is putting it all together. So we've now got our rules, we've got our miniatures, we've got an idea of what we're wanting to achieve. So now we've got to put it together. So my first suggestion here is decide on what it is you're trying to work towards. Are you doing a brigade level? Are you doing division, corps, or army? But do something that is not going to allow you to be overwhelmed. Many of us, myself included, have had huge dreams of recreating this battle or this campaign or that, and we brought all the miniatures and they're still sat on the shelf. I mean, I brought so many of the Union and Confederate troops when they first came out that they're still in a pile under my bed. I've got 6mm medieval troops to build. I've got huge amounts of troops that I need to paint. And most of us in the hobby are the same, so if you do it, welcome to the club, but my advice would be don't go overboard at the start. So probably best thing to do is think, right, I want to start off with a brigade. So you're going to need a commander, you're going to need a couple of artillery pieces, or depending on the scale, one base to represent a battery of artillery, and 2, 3 or 4 bases of infantry as your regiments. Maybe a regiment of cavalry, a base of cavalry who are your scouts, and that's it. Nice and simple. Then, once you've got those ready, if you're playing, so to speak, by yourself, you could then do the same for the other side, and it's not going to take you too long, and then you've got 2 armies to fight with. If you're just doing the one side, cool, you've done your first brigade, now you paint a second brigade. Once you've done a couple of brigades, you've got your division. Do that a few more times, and you've got your first corps. So don't go overwhelmed, just do it in manageable chunks, and that way you won't lose the passion, lose the interest. Also, when you're thinking about it, I guess you would say this could possibly have gone in one of the previous steps, but decide on what nation you're really interested in, because there is research that needs to be done when you're doing historicals. I suppose you don't have to, you could just dive in and do whatever you want, but if you're trying to be historically accurate, different nations did things slightly differently, so you do need to do a bit of research on them, and also especially in the uniforms. So yeah, ask yourself, are you doing the Russians? Are you doing the French, the British, the Austrians, the Prussians, the Spanish, or the Italians? You name it. Do a little bit of research, figure out the uniforms, and figure out the rough way that they organise their formations. Then, if it comes to a campaign, again, I would say start off with a slightly smaller campaign, rather than diving into something like the invasion of Russia. Maybe start with the 100 Days. There's so many different areas of the Napoleonic Wars. You can find something on a smaller scale just to sort of whet your appetite and get yourself in, and then as your forces grow you can then move up to those larger and larger scales, although most likely it would be easier if you do have someone else to play with, because then they can build one force whilst you're building another, and so you can really just concentrate on your one army, but sometimes we don't have other people to play with. And then the final point is the community. Wargaming is mostly a community-driven hobby, although you can have lots of fun playing solo. Myself, I'll do some games solo, and sometimes I'll just go and play with my dad. Other days I'll go along and play with the club. Really, it depends what you want to do. So there's no right or wrong way to it. If you are living in an area where there aren't other people, hey, you can still have a fantastic time on yourself. You can take part in YouTube channel campaigns like I run, where everyone votes on what they want the action to be, and you can get into that sort of community. You can do it on Facebook, and there's plenty of other groups online that you can just bounce ideas backwards and forwards, and that's really good. If you're lucky enough to be in an area where there is an active wargaming club, then definitely get involved with that, just because it's a lot of fun. Yeah, long story short, it's a lot of fun. Also, it allows you, a lot of people will have rule sets that you don't, so it'll give you the opportunity to play different games that you might not want to go out and build an entire army of on yourself without testing it first. So that community aspect is very important. I think, at least over here in New Zealand, that terrible waste of time that it was really screwed with our hobby. We had a thriving a thriving club base, and then COVID came along, and then everyone wasn't allowed to go out for months on end, and then they ended up just playing at home or in smaller groups of 2 or 3 people in each other's garages and basements, and they haven't really come back to the larger club monthly sort of game days and that sort of thing, which is a real shame because they used to have lots and lots of people. But we are getting it back now, which is good, but it's just taken so long. So again, a little around there, but community is such an important part of it, whether you're in person or whether you're online. But definitely try and get involved in Facebook pages, YouTube, wherever else, just because it does help out. You can ask people ideas on uniforms, on formations, rules, you name it. There's going to be other people who have been where you are and have the ideas too, so don't be afraid to ask out. So there you have it, guys. They're my top ideas for getting you going into Napoleonics. Hope it's been helpful to you. Do please leave some comments down below as to what your thoughts are regarding wargaming, what armies you're interested in, what period. Hopefully we'll see you doing some Napoleonics. Share some photos on the Facebook page. Until next time, guys, enjoy your games, and see you then.